Are you kidding me? Rogue is absolutely insane this season, flying through 1 to 100. Let me explain the skill rotation and especially where to put every point at which level. This character didn't exist yesterday, and in a couple of hours we've just flown to level 76 without the Helltide bug and without the help of another player. The highest nightmare dungeon we've cleared so far is at tier 78-80. This is normal Gregoire at level 76. Already did him at 70. I wanted to make it look a bit cooler. We're gonna have to Keltrop him, daze him, Keltrop him again, and then just blast away with your right mouse button, and that's it. Dunzo. Now, how does this do so much damage? We get the Heartseeker as our base skill, which gets bonus attack speed if a critical strikes and double against vulnerable targets, and it actually ricochets off to targets next to it. Then you put down your Keltrops. An enemy in Keltrops take 10x multiplicative damage and 5x more for each second they're in, up to 45%. And then you have another 5% critical strike chance against enemies in Keltrops, and that's double against vulnerable. That gets followed up by the smoke grenade. Enemies affected by smoke grenade take 25% increased damage from you, plus the dark shroud giving you another 8% critical strike chance. And then the final kicker being victimized, dealing direct damage to a vulnerable enemy. And this is a lucky hit, has up to a 50% chance to cause an explosion, dealing 170% of the original damage to them and surrounding enemies. And this one gets multiplied by 120% of your vulnerable damage bonus. And we're currently sitting at a 635% vulnerable damage bonus on level 76. Without having the Paragon board maxed, without having the exploit glyph on level 25 and boosting our vulnerable damage even higher. And the crazy part about that lucky hit chance is I have a 58% lucky hit chance on Heartseeker with one lucky hit item, which means that victimized with a 50% chance, that's 50% of 50%, gives it roughly a 25% chance to trigger. If I now boost my lucky hit up to 100% lucky hit on the skill, even 80 or 90, we're going to sit at a 50% chance that victimized triggers. Just to give you a picture for how this feels versus mobs, you're just literally right-click spamming, dashing, right-click spamming, and that's without the holy bolt. You're essentially going to see some in the gameplay because it just makes leveling even faster. But you're just holding down your right mouse button. And since this is a Heartseeker, I can even shoot here and the shots curve around. It's probably my favorite feature of the skill. It's like, you're still dying. Such brilliant fun. How would I now put the skill points from level 1 on? We do start with Heartseeker into Enhanced Heartseeker and then the branching off. And for the leveling portion, until level 60, 65, we're going to actually use Barrage into Enhanced Barrage, and then we're going to have Barrage as one of our vulnerable skills. That's pretty much the start into the game, getting then the Keltrops into Enhanced Keltrops. We can go straight up for the next level of Keltrops too, so we have them now do the damage to enemies, multiplying up, and that's nice. Plus then having the dash to actually dash around. The next skill I would take is Concussive. After knocking back or knocking down an enemy, you gain increased critical strike chance, and then we can take our Smoke Grenade together with the Enhanced Smoke Grenade for the bonus damage multiplier into the Dark Shroud, together with Dark Shrouds have a chance to not be consumed, and then also giving the bonus critical strike chance when you have 2 shadows active from Dark Shroud. This one we're going to ignore completely, and our skill bar is going to look following until level 65, 70 probably. The next point you want is when you critical strike a dazed enemy, they're knocked down for 0.5 seconds. Because with the smoke grenade, you daze them, and then you have a chance to actually knock them down. This is so good. And absolutely bullies the Hellborn enemies in the Helltide. Any elite that becomes annoying, bullied. Then we're going to go for the next lucky hit that is able to reset our cooldowns. Fantastic. And we'll start doing more damage against healthy and injured enemies, which is probably one of your better damage scalers. With the next points into more critical strike chance as you then knocked down someone, and we're going to reach the lower level. This is where we want, while you move, gain increased energy regeneration. This does help as we're pumping empty barrage between mobs to then keep zooming. In between, you're going to be doing your rogue quest, and we're going to do inner sight here. Attack marked enemies to fill up your inner sight gauge. Attack non-marked enemies fill at 5% of the normal rate. When it's full, gain unlimited energy and 25% critical strike chance. Bonus crit is insane, and we can spam barrage. And this is the most fun moment while leveling. You're essentially going to pummel Heartseeker into them, get the inner sight up, and then just barrage away like there's no tomorrow, which is absolutely incredible fun. Then we're also putting 3 more points in haste to get bonus movement speed above 50% energy and bonus attack speed below 50% energy to essentially refill everything fast. 6 more points until we get victimized. And they're straight going to go into Heartseeker to just boost that damage. And the next point goes into Sturdy for a bit of damage reduction, which then gets followed up by Siphoning Strikes. Critical strikes against close enemies have up to an 85% chance to heal you. That's incredible, because you're just going to stand close to enemies with your Barrage, with your Heartseeker, and you're consistently healing. 85% chance on a 58% happens quite a lot. Then we get our Victimized finally for the bonus damage super multiplier, and we're yoinking up the Siphoning Strikes even more to heal percentual the whole time as you're standing at enemies. It is so good. You'll see that in the gear section gameplay, how we're just consistently healing. Before we reduce the damage even more, we'd rather take 3 points in Weapon Mastery to boost our bonus damage, critical strike damage. Either it's going to be 12% increased damage to vulnerable enemies or 15% increased critical strike damage as you're leveling through. You mostly want to take bows for that damage versus vulnerable enemies, but hey, if you find a crossbow with a very high item power, just take whatever you want for leveling. Now this gets followed up with 3 more points in damage to vulnerable enemies. We're going to get even more energy regeneration. We're going to slam up our damage reduction against damage over time effects and damage reduction while inflicted by control impairing effects. More damage reduction is always better, which pumps up the sturdy damage reduction as well. Then we're going to put 1 point into Shadow Stab, 1 point into Concealment, just to have them to swap out around level 65, 70. And I'll tell you again which gear pieces you need to actually do this and why you're going to do it. 3 more points into Frigate Finesse, because that is increased damage to chilled enemies and bonus increase against frozen enemies. More damage is more damage, and we can chill and freeze enemies easily with certain gear pieces. Then put a bonus point into Dark Shroud, yoink out everything out of the Barrage around level 60, 65, and put the next points into Dark Shroud as well. You do want to have as many points into Dark Shroud as possible with your chest piece, by the way. Which brings us to the gear and the tempering while leveling. I'm already having the almost perfect bow. 925 item, maximum life, damage, critical strike damage. That crit damage should be vulnerable, and then you temper it for vulnerable damage and chance for Heartseeker to cast twice. Incredible. Alternative while leveling, I've been using Elemental Surge on all 3 weapons, and that has been a great fun to just blast everything. Because of the high lucky hit chance of Heartseeker, you almost always get this triggered. And while you're leveling, you always want your main weapon to have the Moonrise aspect. Damaging an enemy with a basic skill grants you a 4% attack speed for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. And that has then a 160% damage multiplier as you're going into Blood Rage after reaching these 5 stacks. And you reach them so goddamn fast. For your swords, you want to temper vulnerable damage, and the Heartseeker chance is currently on it, but you don't actually need that because having Heartseeker chance on your main weapon is usually enough. That being said, during leveling, you're not going to masterwork, so you'd rather just temper Heartseeker on every single item. Later, you're going to replace that through Caltrops duration, so they stack up their damage longer and better. An aspect to take here is Edgemaster, which gives you another 20x multiplier on your Heartseeker arrow. Yep, you just have 20x the whole time because you're shooting with full energy the whole time. And the second weapon is going to rock your source of vulnerable, and that's a Cursed Touch. You have up to a 35% chance for your skills to inflict Vampiric Curse, and enemies that are Vampiric Cursed are vulnerable. And if you then have stores sold into you, they get released as you're dashing to do even more bonus damage. You can see I have, again, the Heartseeker projectiles cast twice on it, so I just have that 100% hit. Later on, again, vulnerable tampering and Caltrops duration. The damage generally we're looking here is Dex, vulnerable, and max life. Talking about Caltrops, that's what the rings have as well. You can then go for the Caltrops cooldown reduction and even more vulnerable damage. It's literally possible everywhere. And you'd be mainly looking for lucky hit and crit chance. Those are the 2 stats most important. Then we're playing the Ring of Elements. We get another 30% increased damage to a set of damage types. And this alternates every 7 seconds, giving us a nice damage boost. Now the fun part is the Circle of Inner Calm, because we're standing still. You can probably see that in the gameplay. When I'm blasting, I'm just standing still. I'm not moving in the Helltide. If I do one of these structures, I'm just standing still, and it's just there. That's triple damage, 30% more for standing still. Lucky hit chance, critical strike damage, crit chance, and then you can again get Caltrop cooldown reduction and vulnerable damage. And the same for the amulet, more vulnerable damage, and then dodge chance, max life, armor, whatever you need. Lucky hit chance preferred. And then bonus ranks to exploit would be great. to do more damage to healthy and injured enemies. And the next main aspect is adaptability. When cast below 50% maximum resource, basic skills will restore more. We don't need this. What we want is, when cast at or above 50% maximum resource, basic skills deal 120% increased damage. For the gloves, we're looking at attack speed, lucky hit, crit, and then you can temper this for more vulnerable damage again. And keep in mind, this is very frustrating because it's cutthroat, 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 and then vulnerable damage. The amount of items I've already breaked is annoying, and I'm really scared of actually trying to get 100 gear. For the utility, you're going to do the funny part where you go lucky hit, slow, immobilize, stun, freeze. You kind of want to have 2 items with freeze, 1 item with slow, and 1 item with stun. So that goes for your chest, boots, pants, and gloves essentially, that you're able to apply any kind of status effect. And the aspect we're playing is Retribution. Distant enemies have a chance to be stunned for 2 seconds when they hit you. Who cares? But you deal 30% increased damage to stunned or knocked down enemies. Well, we can daze and knock them down. We can stun them with the stun tempering. Yeah, fantastic. That gives us another 30% beautiful damage multiplier. Don't mind if I do. Now our boots one's resistance to all elements, armor, dex, or max life. And then we currently have audacity on it. That's obviously useless. What we're rather looking for is aspect of concussive strikes. Damaging an enemy has up to a 20% chance to daze them for 2 seconds. Don't care, because you deal 20% increased damage to dazed enemies. How do we daze them? You just smoke bomb them. They'll take 25% bonus damage. Oh yeah, and then they take another 20% bonus damage, multiplicative. Have you ever done this against a Helltide, Hellborn opponent that tries to kill you? They can't even stand up. This is how quick they die. Now during leveling, I'm actually playing the Tacit of the Dawning Sky because that thing is stupid good. It just gives me straight up resistance to all elements, all stats, maximum life. It just makes sure that I stay alive, and whenever I get hit with non-physical damage type, you gain 11% maximum resistance to that type. If I get hit by lightning, I get another resistance. This allows me to just be almost at 70, 70, 70 already at level 76 with minimal Paragon board investments. Later, we will need a pants with the ranks and Heartseeker and one of my favorite defensive temperings, and that's the Umber's aspect. Lucky hit, critical strikes with marksman skills have up to a 57% chance to grant a free Dark Shroud Shadow. Dark Shroud is your damage reduction, and your marksman skill is Heartseeker, which gets the highest lucky hit chance possible, and that's, well, 60% off 50%. Again, if I bring this up to 80, 90, or 100%, that's an always 60% chance. And as soon as you have Umber's aspect on an item and you keep playing it, then you can swap out Dark Shroud and you can essentially start playing Concealment instead, because Dark Shroud happens automatically and you get another skill to get out of danger, a get out of jail card. The same, by the way, goes for Shadow Stab. This one I would get around level 65, 70 as you start slowly doing Nightmare Dungeons. And then you can phase out the Barrage because you'll catch yourself just Heartseekering anymore, not barraging anymore. Barrage is actually in your set of skills not helping you because your Curse Touch is triggering often enough. You don't need that bonus vulnerable. You're good. And then we can use Shadow Step to get out of danger card in case we're doing Nightmare Dungeons where there's a lot of elite effects, freezes, and other annoying things happening where Shadow Step will really help you. On our chest, we want ranks and Dark Shroud, and then maximum life, armor, whatever you need in this case. Lucky hit chance to slow, stun, freeze. Whatever you have not taken on the others, you take here. And then the cool aspect is enemies hit by your grenade skills have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to be frozen. More critical strike chance, more better. Which you'll actually get from all your skills. We went through the skill tree, and then you deal 15 or 25% increased critical strike damage against frozen or stunned enemies. That's why we also want the stun tempering to really make sure we get them stunned on the lucky hits. And if we then freeze them with our grenade, it makes life even easier. And this, by the way, counts for staggered bosses as well. So if we stagger them by dazing them, by stunning them, by slowing them, by freezing them with all our temperings, they get really fast staggered, and then we do all the bonus damage multipliers to them too. Beautiful. Lastly, on the helmet, you kind of do want Harlequin Crest, and now you're going to say, wow, that's not achievable. It is actually very easy achievable, and the funny part is I could wear that from level 35 on. I have a gem in, that's why it says level 40. If I put the gem out, it says level 35. So from level 35 on, I could already wear this. How do you get Harlequin Crest really easy right now? Well, if you already have a level 100 character, you finish the Iron Wolf quest line, you kill Uber Lilith, you kill one Tormented boss, and then last but not least, you level up another character like I'm doing right now, and you could get your 4th Resplendent Spark easily like that, or maybe you just found another uber unique like Andariel's Visage that you don't need and you're going to throw it out of the window, which is kind of funny though now because I have Andariel's Visage and I might have to play some Poison Rogue. It's useless on a Necro, but hey, maybe I can use it on my rogue. Now, until you have this, you kind of see that we have a complete free slot. So put on your helmet whatever you feel like and whatever contributes and helps your character. Since we're standing still and getting Dark Shrouds from our lucky hit chance, you might play in Shrouding too, because that gives you even more Dark Shrouds as you're standing still. And each Dark Shroud shadow grants another increased damage reduction. Might just help you to stay alive longer. Now to the Paragon board, and here I would advise you to go over the left side first, then over the right side, just to get the bonus resistance to elements. Then the first lift you want is Ranger, which actually gives you for every 5 dex bonus increased damage on your Heartseeker, and then while wielding a ranged weapon you get 10% damage reduction. Fantastic. The first sport we're going into is Exploit Weakness. Whenever you deal damage to a vulnerable enemy, they take 1% increased damage from you, and that's another 25%. And you can take vulnerable damage. Fantastic. Plus damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. Really good. And on the side, there's even more vulnerable damage, plus the actual glyph called Chip for more physical damage and a physical damage multiplier. Before you go into the left, I would though go into the right, because the right gives you straight more resistance to all elements, and that's just really simple and easy to take. And you're actually having the Devious glyph here, which grants you 150% bonus to all magic nodes within range. And the fun part is we have 9 points left over that I kept exactly for this scenario, that if you're meeting something like me actually not putting enough dexterity in, you can take 1, 2, 3, and you get this dexterity out very easy. So you get another 6 points left over to maneuver a bit around. This also gives us another 10% increased damage multiplier against crowd-controlled enemies, which then brings us up into the board for Deadly Ambush. You deal 22.5 increased critical strike damage to enemies affected by your trap skills. Well, don't mind if I do. I'm going to caltrop you like no tomorrow. Then Exploit for the bonus vulnerable damage, and you want the 49 points in strength here. Technically, we could weasel out another 2 points here in strength if you really want to. We have the 6 left over. That's for you. But you could also weasel out more maximum life if you feel like you're lacking maximum life. It goes to the left into the cheap shot board for 5% increased damage for each nearby enemy that is crowd controlled. And well, we do crowd control everything, right? Especially with the ricochet of the Heartseeker, we crowd control even more. Plus the control glyph for more damage to those crowd control targets and an even bigger damage multiplier, taking obviously the damage to crowd controlled enemies down here too. Then lastly, actually not lastly, one more board. Cunning Stratagem board, plus the Ambush glyph for 5 strength purchased. You do damage to targets affected by trap skills, and then another multiplier into that as well. And the left side is the No Witnesses board, and that is the Pride glyph. Pride will give us more bonus to the magic nodes and increased physical damage to both healthy and injured enemies, and we're essentially boosting damage and maximum life. That's actually really good because you can boost the maximum life here quite nicely to then increase your life even further. Now with these 6 points, we could fill out the more life nodes. You could weasel out a max life up here if you feel like you need another point of resistance because you're not fully resistant out yet. No problem, take it. Or just bring yourself to get that bonus strength node. This is all a little bit opportunity points that you can move around as you feel, as it fits your build. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope the rogue brings you as much joy as it did me. Down here is the leveling live stream if you kind of want to check out how smooth it went. First 10 levels were a bit iffy until I understood the build fully. But if I rather can interest you in the Necromancer, there's an absolutely insane golem build that's just rampaging through the pit and needs minimal gear requirements to just do that. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. Take care.